The foster care system is designed to put children in the best possible situation for them. I have no doubt that employees of the system have the children's best interests in mind, but mistakes are sometimes made, and the consequences can be disastrous. This story involves a Canadian foster child who, due to their Youth Criminal Justice Act, must remain anonymous. She's been given several aliases, but for the sake of clarity, I'll be referring to her by the most common one I found for the duration of this video. This is the story of Jennie Ewing. It's not clear exactly when and where Jennie Ewing was born, but it was likely in Ontario around 1992. Whatever the case, Jennie's early life wasn't easy. Her mother was addicted to alcohol and drugs and tried to keep the family together for the sake of Jennie and her brother and sister. But at the age of 2, Jennie was taken out of the family home and adopted. Growing up, Jennie struggled in her new home. She had problems with anger and violence, personality disorders, and had trouble in school. But when she assaulted her younger sister, it's not clear if this was her biological sister or adoptive one. This was the final straw. Jennie was given back to Children's Aid and for several years was a Crown Ward of Family and Children's Services, Niagara. By 2005, now 13-year-old Jennie was living with a new foster family, but her problems continued. She soon began a relationship with a man who I believe was around the age of 40. Her foster parents tried to stop this, but to no avail. After stealing their truck to meet her new boyfriend on December 9th of that year, Jennie was removed from the home and on December 14th was sent to live with her final foster family, the Burrows. Jennie was only supposed to stay with the Burrows for a short amount of time, but it turned out to be an even shorter visit than anyone anticipated. Jennie arrived at her new foster home around 11 a.m. on Wednesday, December 14th. And was greeted by her new foster mother, Margaret Burrows. The Burrows had another child staying with them, 3-year-old Matthew Reed. I found conflicting sources saying how long Matthew had been at the house. Some said he had been there since he was 10 months old, others said he had only been there for a couple of months. Another source I found said he had been removed from his biological mother at 10 months, so maybe that's what the conflicting source meant. Regardless, Margaret was clearly very protective of Matthew. When Jennie arrived with the social worker, Margaret asked if Matthew would be safe with Jennie in the house. The social worker assured her that Jennie loved children and Matthew would be perfectly fine. FACS is very discreet about children's past, so all Margaret knew about Jennie was that she had theft and behavioral issues. Despite the social worker's claim, Margaret made sure to never leave the children alone together. The rest of the day passed without incident. Jennie woke early the next morning, and Margaret continued to show her around the house. But around 8 a.m., she realized Matthew hadn't woken up yet and grew concerned. She went upstairs to check on him and found him on the floor, lifeless. Margaret immediately called 911, and paramedics rushed to the scene. They attempted to perform CPR on Matthew, but it was too late. He was already dead. The truth wouldn't be a mystery for long. Matthew had 2 handwritten notes placed under his right shoulder. One said, "I smothered him. The police can do what they want to me. I don't care. Let them put me in jail." The other said, "Mommy," was the last thing he said. Both notes were signed by Jennie Ewing. Police went to Jennie's room while they found her sitting in front of the mirror, calmly brushing her hair. She confessed right away and was arrested. After going to bed at 9 p.m. on the night of December 14th, Jennie had woken up again at 2 a.m. in a fit of anger. She didn't want to be at a new foster home and would have rather been back with one of her previous ones. In fact, 2 days earlier, one of Jennie's former foster mothers had agreed to take her back, but this never happened. Instead, 3-year-old Matthew became the target for Jennie to take her rage out on. She went to his room, took him out of his crib, and placed him on the floor. Then she smothered him, probably with a pillow. It's believed that Matthew never saw his killer's face. Once he went still, Jennie, who was presumably on her period at the time, drew a cross on his forehead with the blood and also smeared blood on his cheeks. Then she went back to her room, wrote the 2 notes, placed them under his shoulder, and went back to bed. On December 16th, Jennie was charged with first-degree murder. When the judge asked her if she knew what these charges meant, she replied, "Yes," and smiled. But not everyone was sure these charges were fair. Jennie was thought to have ADHD and either fetal alcohol syndrome or fetal alcohol effect, which is similar but not as severe. It couldn't be determined exactly which one of these 2 she had, if either, because there wasn't a lot known about her birth mother. However, Jennie was believed to have the emotional and mental state of a 6 or 7-year-old. Because of this, the charges were later reduced to second-degree murder. Jennie's trial began in January 2007, and she was tried as a juvenile. Jennie, who was 15 at this point, cried as the details of the case were read. On Monday, January 22, 2007, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She was eventually sentenced to 7 years in prison, which means she should be out by now. I've seen reports that said she was living with her father or stepfather, but can't confirm this 100%. After the murder, social services in Canada came under fire. Unsurprisingly, Matthew's birth mother, Tanya Reid, was furious. Matthew had been taken from her for his own protection, but he still ended up dead. After Jennie pleaded guilty, Tanya wondered if it was known beforehand by social services that Jennie was at a risk for violence, though from everything I've seen, social services was well aware of this. On January 31, 2007, it was announced that there would be an inquest into Matthew's death. The inquest would be handled by a 5-person coroner's jury, which would make recommendations aimed at preventing deaths in similar circumstances in the future. The inquest began in February 2010 and wrapped up about a month later. The jury came up with 45 recommendations to avoid future similar deaths of children in care. The recommendations were for several different organizations, including FACS Niagara, Niagara Child and Youth Services, and the Children's Aid Society of Haldimand, Norfolk, where Matthew Reid was a ward at the time of his death. I don't know many details about how these recommendations might have been put into practice, but hopefully they either have or will prevent something like this from happening again. So that's almost everything I could find on Jennie Ewing, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. Who do you think is more to blame for Matthew's death, Jennie or social services? Or do they deserve equal blame? Do you think the criticism of social services is justified? Or would you rather focus on the fact that cases like this are a rarity and most social workers have the children's best interests in mind? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and share this video if you found it interesting, and if you like my other videos, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.